Hello everyone, Sens here, and welcome to this video on Canada taking stock. In this video, we're going to look at some of Canada's key geographic, demographic, and economic features. I hope you enjoy it. So let's get started. So by the time we're done, you should be familiar with some of the key features of Canada's geographic and demographic character. Well, here's a good place to start. This chart shows some area, coastline, and border information that's actually quite important, particularly if you are planning around sovereignty and defense issues. Our area as a country is 9,984,670 square kilometers. That is the second largest in the world after Russia. Our coastline is the longest in the world at 243,797 kilometers. That is the longest. And a lot of that, of course, is because our coastline includes more than 52,000 islands. So that obviously inflates the number. Our land border is 8,893 kilometers, and that is the longest in the world. When we look at some of these geographic features, I think one thing to keep in mind is the scale of the country. The distance from the Atlantic coast to the Pacific coast is over 5,000 kilometers. The longest distance from east to west is actually 5,514 kilometers. The distance from Ottawa to Grise Fjord in Nunavut is 3,460 kilometers. And the longest distance from north to south is 4,634 kilometers. These are enormous distances. And that can be illustrated with comparisons like these. This map shows a map of Canada with a map of Western Europe, Eastern Europe, and Central Europe and the Balkans superimposed on it. And as you can see, the entire territory of this European space would fit into Canada's north. So it's a very large physical area that we're talking about. This particular map shows Canada's geography in a more conventional sense. I just wanted to run through this quickly because it illustrates the length and diversity of the border. I mean, if we start here at Victoria, we have our Pacific coastline, issues revolving around fisheries and immigration and the environment. We go up to the Alaska Panhandle, cooperation of the United States on issues all through this area. Oil, sea, gas, seabed resources issues when we get up to the Beaufort Sea. Northern sovereignty issues here, passing along down through Newfoundland, Labrador. Fisheries concerns, search and rescue cooperation issues, resource management, and then coming to here to the Canada-US border, Great Lakes management, immigration, policing, trafficking, all the issues that engage Canada, the United States, and the border. And we have a very long border, and this is a fundamental reality that engages both Canadian defense, security, foreign policy, border management, and a variety of other aspects of Canadian domestic and international politics. When it comes to demographic data, this chart here shows our population, 36 million people plus as of 2017. That puts us about 38th in the world. And there's our population density at 4 people per square kilometer. That's tied for 5th least dense in the world. Now, of course, if you talk to someone living in downtown Vancouver or downtown Toronto about that, they'd probably not feel that it was not particularly dense. But, of course, that's an average over the entire country, right? So we do have a very low population density. Furthermore, about 0.5% of the world's population lives in Canada. So overall, we don't have a lot of the world's population here. Approximately 82% of the Canadian population lives in urban areas. We are very much a city-dwelling country. And 90% of the Canadian population lives within 160 kilometers of the Canada-US border. In 2016, according to the census, Canada's Aboriginal population, so that's First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, was 1.67 million people, which accounts for about 4.9% of the total population. This chart looks at some of the dynamics surrounding immigration and foreign-born Canadians. This is all according to the 2016 census. So you can see that 7.5 million foreign-born people came to Canada through the immigration process. If we want to break that down a little bit, that's about 1 in 5 Canadians. If we want to break that down a little bit, we can take this and go down here. And this shows us the percentage of those immigrants that came to Canada by period of immigration. So, we have 7.5 million foreign-born Canadians coming to Canada. And if you take a look at the most recent immigrants, 2011 to 2016, that's 1.2 million people. As for their points of origin, those are shown here in order: Philippines, India, China, Iran, and you can see the rest. Kind of interesting. I don't know if anything strikes you surprising about that figure, but it's worth reflecting on this data because obviously patterns of immigration and both the domestic politics involving diaspora communities in Canada, foreign-born Canadians, and larger debates around immigration and refugee policy are all part of the national dialogue, both on a foreign policy side and on the domestic policy side. A little bit more on demographic data. There's our adult literacy rate. It's 99%. I mean, you wouldn't know it reading some of the stuff that you read out there, but it is 99%. Life expectancy for men is 80, for a woman is 84. Sorry guys, but that's the data. The average 82.5, if you're wondering how in the world do you get an 82.5 average out of 80 and 84, oh, that's because of rounding of numbers. That's all. That puts us about 12th in the world. When it comes to Human Development Index, so this is the United Nations way of measuring human well-being in countries and around the world. It's out of 1,000 possible points. Canada ranked 10th in the world in 2016 at a 0.920 rating. It's a bit of a decline, and typically Canada will go into paroxysms of panic when its HDI indicators drop, but really we're talking very minute changes here, can drop you up and down a few rankings. So it's a little less of a concern than it's often made out to be. Here's some economic data, and we'll be coming back to this, of course, but our GDP, roughly speaking, of course this is often very rough information, is about US 1.65 trillion in 2017. In Canadian dollars, 1.46 trillion. That puts us 10th in the world. And again, some people are often surprised by that, but our GDP is actually bigger than Russia's. So, what does that mean in terms of the role Canada should be playing in the world? When it comes to GDP per capita, so this is in US dollars purchasing power parity, we're at 44,000 in 2017. That's per Canadian. That puts us 16th in the world. This PPP thing, this is, you can look it up, but it's basically a way of accounting for or controlling for variations in the prices of goods from one country to another. So it kind of equalizes out cost differentials to come up with a rough estimate of GDP per capita in parity terms, purchasing power terms. Now, this last piece is important for us. The GDP from exports, 30% in 2017. So roughly 1/3 of Canada's GDP is export dependent. So that's a big driver for Canadian foreign policy, right? Because the whole concern about the future of the trading system, about the importance of trade for Canada, trade opportunities, trade institutions, trade agreements, all of that is wrapped up in the crucial importance of trade for Canada's economy. Okay, So by now, you should have a sense and be familiar with the key features of Canada's geographic and demographic character. Okay. Well, I found some of that interesting. I think for a lot of people, it's not particularly surprising if you're someone coming from outside Canada and are learning about this for the first time. There's some stuff there that could be surprising, but I think other information like this is important. It gives us a sense of a grounding in Canada's physical characteristics, its demographic characteristics, and its economic capacity. And I think the question for us going forward is, does anything about this information sort of give you a sense of whether Canada is playing its rightful role in the world? Because we often get arguments in Canada, or debates, about those who argue that Canada is punching above its weight in international affairs, that we actually do more than our demographic or economic capacities might suggest we should be doing. But there's also others that argue, no, wait, we should be doing a lot more. We're not punching above our weight, we're punching below our weight. So these sorts of things matter. They matter for what type of foreign policy you think might be appropriate given the country's capacities. And then, of course, a lot of these things inform Canadian interests, right, in terms of trade, immigration, border security, all these sorts of things. I hope you enjoyed this video. We'll see you again soon.